So welcome everybody. The last session of today. My name is Scott Urbis. I'll be presenting along with my good friends and colleagues, Don Lee, who's a senior consultant here, and Adrian Crowfoot. And today we're just going to go through some things, integrating solutions with some of our products. So the whole purpose of this presentation is to just share a sample highway project that we've been developing over the last year or so. If you recall, last year we did a similar presentation of this, and we used a sample project that we were working on. We kind of showed how that was supposed to work with ProjectWise and iTwin and all our various solutions. So we're going to go through this again, kind of a similar presentation. We have a little bit of, made a few updates to it. So basically, we're going to discuss how ProjectWise, OpenRoads Designer, OpenBridge Designer, Synchro, and iTwin technology can be seamlessly integrated together. So next slide, please, Adrian. So why are we doing this? So we get a lot of users that ask us, they get confused. We have all these different products. How is all these different products? How are they supposed to work together? How are they supposed to be connected and integrated? So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this. And we really wanted to show, how other applications could be integrated in a connected environment for a typical civil infrastructure project. So next slide, please. So the solutions we're going to be showcasing here and talking about are Open Cities Planner, OpenRoads Designer, OpenBridge Designer, Synchro, and ProjectWise. We'll talk a little bit about some iTwin and context share as well. So our agenda is I'm going to kick off the presentation here and talk a little bit about the actual project and the project details, a little bit of the setup, but not too much. Don's going to come in later and talk about some project considerations and a little bit of the setup, and then Adrian's going to take us to the end with the common data environment, some more of the setup discussion. Let's move on to the next slide. So just talk initially about our project here. So this is just a sample project. This isn't anything that's being really built right now out in the field or anything, but it's just a data set that we've had for, I don't know, several years now, 6-7 years. The data set that we created, and we just kind of built upon this last year, turned it into more of a widening and a resurfacing project. So it's I-95 and State Route 97. It's a partial reconstruction of I-95, reconstruction of the ramps, and some reconstruction of State Route 97. So next slide here. So we'll take a look at the typical section details here. So you can see it's fairly involved project, divided highway. We're doing some widening to the inside, putting in some new lanes there, putting in a concrete median barrier. On the right side, we got full depth pavement construction going on, and then on the left side of the road, we have some overlay and reconstructions. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. So I'm going to start off with just kind of showing you real quickly how we set up the project, or how the project was intended to be accessed. So we're going to start off here inside of Open Cities Planner. So we have 3 main areas here. So Adrian, if you could click on the little video and play that. Oh, go back to the previous slide. Click on the video if you can. There we go. So we've got these 3 main areas here. We got the one that focuses on the right-of-way and the parcel information. We got the design portal button, which brings us into ProjectWise to access our design applications, OpenRoads, OpenBridge, the iTwin stuff, all can be accessed from there. And then of course we have the construction portal where we can access the construction activities inside of Synchro. So I'm going to jump over here to show a little bit of the Open Cities stuff. So inside of Open Cities here, we can see our project map. Also will allow us to visualize our property information. So our parcels, all of our owner data, all that kind of upfront stuff that you would need on a project. So here I can come in here, select the parcel, I can get all the appropriate information I would need about that particular parcel, owner name, size, acreage, all that kind of good stuff. So very easily gives us a way to get into the get in and analyze the existing conditions and find out some existing information about our particular project. So let's go to the next slide here. So once again, we can also, inside of Open Cities, we can take a look at the reality model data as well. So we can go ahead and click on that video for me. We'll take a peek at our reality model that we can integrate here inside of Open Cities. So here we're just going to take a quick look at our reality model and our existing conditions for this particular project. You can see it's a pretty high definition reality model. You can see the pavement lines on the road, all the pavement markings, trees, and grass, and everything and whatnot. So it's very high definition. We can zoom over here and take a look at our existing bridge and take a look at some of the other existing conditions in this particular project, just within inside of this reality model inside of Open Cities. So very powerful stuff here. So very cool that we can do this. So from there, once we analyze our existing conditions inside of Open Cities, we can come into the design portal here. It's going to give us access to ProjectWise and anything we may need to do inside of ProjectWise. So it's going to browse over here and take a quick look at how this is set up a little bit. Brief overview. You can see here's all our folders and our file structure here. I'm going to navigate down to our combined model area where we have our composite model for our project. You can see we have our bridge design in here, our drainage. It's basically where we have all our container files, our composite 3D model files. So we'll come over here and take a look at our composite model for our road design. We'll go ahead and take a look at that inside of ProjectWise Explorer. And this is where we're going to access the design file and be able to access the design data into OpenRoads Designer. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here's our project inside of OpenRoads Designer. You're going to see up here in the upper left is our plan view, of course. Our cross-sectional view there. You can see we got some pretty complex roadway components going on, and then our 3D model. So again, on that particular cross-section here, we're just going to scroll through there. You could take a look at the cross-sectional view of our model. You can see it's fairly complex, as I mentioned. It's not just a simple, brand new construction job. Parts of it are new construction, but parts of it also have overlay and stripping components and things like that. And also, once we're done designing inside of OpenRoads Designer, of course, now we can go straight into iTwin and take a look at our iTwin. So here is a image of the project inside of Design Review. We can do some further analysis on our project. Go to the next slide, please. And here is where we can analyze things like item types and pay items from our particular project inside of the iTwin. So those are just some of the things that we can do with all these different products that are integrated together. So once we do all those design activities, then of course that brings us to the final and third step, which is the construction portal area of our project. So we'll go ahead and click on that. That's going to bring us into Synchro, where we can review all of our construction activities. So once we're inside Synchro, you can see here we have some iModels in here. We can take a look at our schedule, our dashboard, some of the other documents that are related to construction. Just going to come over here to my schedule. You can see here in the schedule tab, we got a view of the 3D model in the upper portion of the dialog. And in the bottom down here, we have the schedule that's associated to our particular project. So you can see how all this is tied together just by going through that start page. It's kind of like a 1, 2, 3 kind of step process to get to these various areas and to get to all of our products and making sure that they're seamlessly integrated together. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone that helped work on the project team. When we first started setting this up, we had to identify some key individuals and experts to help us do all this. So on the back end, setting up the ProjectWise stuff, we had, of course, Adrian and Don kind of leading the charge on that and helping out with that. The open cities and the reality modeling, Adrian took care of a lot of the open city stuff, and Kurt Rasmussen took care of the actual reality models. I give him some credit for that. I pretty much handled the roadway design and modeling, and then Steve Willoughby from the bridge team was doing the bridge design and modeling, and then James Anding and the product team is doing some design, drainage, and modeling. Jordan Hatfield handled the existing utilities, and Dan Ahern handled the item type setup. Joey Llewellyn and Ian Rosum helped with the iTwin stuff, and Dan Sheldon helped with the Synchro and construction. So with that, hopefully that's a brief overview of kind of what we're going to cover today. I'm going to turn it over to Don so he can get into some more of the details and some of the more technical area or setup.
You hear me okay?
So go ahead. Yep, I can hear you.
Very good. Well, welcome everybody. Yeah, we wanted to talk about this because a lot of times as users, you guys are always asking, well, you know, how does it all go together? So that was the whole intention of this, as Scott had detailed. So there was some planning involved here to kind of figure out, as we were about to develop this, you know, what do we need to consider? And so, you know, some of the items we had to look at for this as we were defining this and trying to put it together, and many of you all can relate to this, is, you know, what was the scope and the schedule going to be like for this? You know, how were we expecting this to progress? So we had to take some considerations there, and you'll see that we decided it was going to be broken up into a few major chunks. We decided we were going to have a planning stage, we were going to go to design, and we were going to take it to construction. So definitely scope and schedule was something that we needed to, you know, kind of define as we were looking at this. Next is, who are the stakeholders? And many a times this is where, you know, when we work on projects, you know, we keep things in-house, we usually do our design, but we wanted to make sure that we opened this up for a lot of activity, a lot of collaboration. You know, the core of ProjectWise is collaboration after all. So we wanted to make sure, could we support those owner-operators in providing them with a solution? Would the design team be able to work on this, you know, within certain constraints, within these different disciplines, if you will? And then, you know, who were the reviewers going to be? Were they in-house? Were they, you know, possibly those owner-operators? We wanted to make sure that we were supporting that effort. And then, again, we talked about the construction side. So what's this going to mean as we were feeding this to contractors? So, you know, I think this is pretty consistent with many projects that are out there. So we wanted to make something that was aligned with what you guys actually do every day. This is just a sample, of course, but certainly we wanted to try to align with the efforts that you guys put in every day on your projects. In addition to this, standards. Well, a lot of people think of standards and we think of CAD standards. Well, there's a little bit more to standardization and just general governance of what we're doing. So we wanted to make sure we understood, you know, what the design standard was going to be, right, from an engineering and CAD standpoint. But also we wanted to discuss document management and what that workflow was going to be as well. There's a couple of different dimensions when we think about managing standards. So those were definitely key items of interest for us on this particular project. And then lastly, as we come together, because of the scope of the project, we needed to consider the solutions, you know, the applications that would be involved along this story, and how they would all interrelate and work together. So next slide, if you could, Adrian. So in this particular one, we think about stages in the life cycle, if you will. And in many cases, we've got our planning, the design, construction. We get into operations and maintenance. Can you click once for me, Adrian? Because the focal point on this is we're going to work on the plan, design, and construct component. Can you mouse? There you go. And so this is the area that we're going to be focused on. And we built this kind of framework, if you will, around. Of course, once we get this into iTwin, we can take that further. But for, you know, for the event and for the quantity of users or colleagues that we had working on this, we didn't want to overwhelm you guys and take it all the way through. And that's certainly something that we're going to continue to consider and put together next time. Yeah, you can go ahead next. And so we talk about the standards. How do we manage these? Well, of course, ProjectWise. If ProjectWise is the core of our collaboration, we want to make sure that we're leveraging managed workspaces. This is one of the best ways to provide any type of governance on how users are designing these files. And so we were leveraging the new dynamic configurations that many of you are probably familiar with. If you're a ProjectWise administrator, they've been implemented to many organizations around the world. And we were leveraging this to capture those CAD standards and deliver them on the project. Of course, this is going to be applied to all those project stakeholders. And we're going to support not only the solutions, those various applications, if you will, but also those versions. We needed to make considerations for that because if you recall, there's different product schemas and different releases. We need to manage that. And we wanted to break this up by not only the client, but the releases within those clients as those applications are changing. So we wanted to make sure we had good structure to be able to manage this as the technology was advancing. The general core concept is to keep everyone consistent. Next slide, sir. And so that's how we were handling the design, but I spoke of some other aspects, the document naming and some of that. Well, this is where we get into just our general workflow and process. And for this, we wanted to, rather than make up a workflow or process, we want to use an industry recognized process. And we are implementing in this particular project, we had implemented the ISO 19650 standard. And essentially what this is a documented workflow or process that's focused on the asset itself. So we're able to, basically manage that building information model, which is the core to this particular project. And of course, it's worth noting, ProjectWise can manage the ISO 19650 experience. So that's what we did on this particular project. So not just making up CAD standards, not just making up processes, we applied those. So on to the solutions now. With the solutions, we implemented a couple of solutions that you saw. We talked about Open Cities Planner. Of course, at the core of this, and Scott was, and team were heavily involved in utilizing OpenRoads Designer to do those roads, to do the utilities, to do the drainage. So there was a heavy footprint of OpenRoads Designer in there, but also we mentioned Steve Willoughby and the bridge engineers. They leveraged OpenBridge in this scenario. Of course, we're going to hand these models off to our contractor in this story, and we wouldn't be able to do that without Synchro. So that was another solution that we made sure that we had implemented. And of course, this is all wrapped around the ProjectWise experience, where we leveraged some capabilities such as context share and just the general iTwin technology that you guys hear so much about. Next slide, sir. And so if I was to look at this, how would we put this together? Well, we've kind of encapsulated this entire experience around Open Cities Planner as kind of that front page. For many of projects, you've got multiple stakeholders. It could also be just the general public. We wanted to be able to give a landing page for that particular project, and we felt Open Cities Planner would be the best place to store that information for all. Now, within that, we broke it up into a couple components. Back one slide there for a minute. There you go. We are putting ProjectWise and Synchro out there. That's, those are hosting many of our applications, but that entire stack is really sitting on this idea of iTwin. So next slide. From here, what we did was we leveraged ProjectWise overall And this is a compilation of different capabilities. We've got not only the design integration server, but Explorer, as well as ProjectWise 365. And it was 365 that it's helping us synchronize and secure an iTwin that we're passing on in this particular instance. Next slide. And so we mention this many a times. We talk about ProjectWise, ProjectWise 365, and we get asked a lot by users, what do these do? How do they all work together? So I just want to give you a quick screen here and just quickly talk about this. So first and foremost, who are the users and what are the capabilities with each respective solution? Well, if you're using ProjectWise 365 with, in combination, an optional ProjectWise Drive, which is a utility within it, this is really for essentially all users, but predominantly your project managers and your reviewers. And one of the reasons this is so is because we have many capabilities for things with your design tasks, reviewing and tracking those issues, as well as having dashboards. But one key thing is that it's really, from a CAD perspective, there's no managed workspace directly tied within that. So working within the web browser isn't necessarily going to give you the managed workspace in this particular instance. So for somebody that's doing more of a document management or a project manager review type of activity, what you're going to find is that that's going to be best handled through the web browser. And there's really no install in that case, unless you wanted ProjectWise Drive, of course. Now for ProjectWise, within the design integration experience and using Explorer, well, this is really where the designers get to do a lot more. And so the designers specifically do get, all the other capabilities, but even more. And the biggest is probably the managed workspace. There are many other capabilities within it, but I think that's probably the biggest difference right up front. When you go through the web browser, there's not a managed workspace. When you go through Explorer, you're going to get the managed workspace. So definitely caters to designers. So something worth noting. Next slide, please. And so as we started to build this environment, we talked about the workflow. How is all this data going to flow around? What should we be doing? Who's going to have what file, when, and how is that going to be communicated amongst all these stakeholders? And so we talked about those three big those three big moments: the planning, the design, and the construction. Now we know OpenCity's Planner, by its name alone, was going to support a lot of our planning activities. But within the design environment, we needed to understand that there was going to be a couple of stages. There's going to be some existing conditions that may be captured by survey, right-of-way data that might be gathered. And then we were also going to be talking about those designers who are going to edge match and work along with them, and how that data is going to cycle through it. Well, ProjectWise was established using ISO 19650 to assist us in supporting that workflow there. Now, at that point, we're going to communicate that over to our construction team utilizing Synchro, and that's where the handoff with iTwin kind of spans. And of course, some of that survey right-of-way data and others can feed back into OpenCity's Planner at our discretion. Remember, we've got a variety of different users out there, and again, going to OpenCity's Planner could serve for the benefit of the public there in that instance. Next slide, if you could. And so, as you see, we've got OpenCity's Planner where we've got, the landing page. This is where the project actually is hosting a variety of different links, as Scott had detailed earlier. Next slide, please. And from that, we're able to jump in and access, those environments. So in this case, just I'm in a DGN looking at my 3D model. I could be a designer. Next slide, if you could. I could be jumping out to the ProjectWise environment, and it's within the ProjectWise 365 environment. I could be securing and synchronizing an iTwin. Next slide, if you could. And from there, that iTwin gets fed over to my Synchro team, where they then begin to consume a lot of that data and start to take it a little bit further on down the road, no pun intended. Next slide, if you could, Adrian.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yep.
I'll be
Thank
taking
you.
over now. So, to set up this project, I'm just going to go through some of the things that we did, or I did, Don and I did, to set it up. The project details and considerations teed off a few requirements for the common data environment. As we've discussed before, and just summarizing, the project team wanted to provide entry points for different personas. I wanted to utilize reality data from the project area, deliver a project information model to the DOT, and to present project status to the project manager. So how did we set that up? Well, first thing I did was I gathered resources and reference material. I created a framework for the project information model, and then we implemented role-based entry points. So I'm going to show you how we kind of got to that stuff. Let's see how these items fit together. In this project, we had the three major task groups that we've talked about before. We had right-of-way and survey, design, and construction. The core data of the system includes references, resources, documents, and design models. The core data is stored as files and data in ProjectWise and Reality Management. And just to note, Reality Management was previously known as Context Share. Then the project information model, it ties together the appropriate reality data, GIS data, and design models to provide a review for each major task. The project model is used for different purposes, such as the parcel identification, design review, and construction planning and quantity takeoffs. And finally, the information is presented to different personas in a way that makes sense for them. Examples include Microsoft Teams, dashboards, and iModel Review. So in ProjectWise, what we did in the data source, we had one main work area that houses three sub-work areas that represent each major task group. And these task groups are then related to the corresponding ProjectWise 365 or construction projects. So we had two ProjectWise 365 projects, and then one construction project in Synchro. We had three main data sets for reference. We had the reality mesh from Reality Management that was known as Context Share before. Then we had the county parcels that we got from the county's GIS system, just shape files that I used, and I'll talk about that a little more. And then we had a civil workspace from the DOT. Now, the reality data was built by flying a UAV to take photos and then using context capture, now known as iTwin capture, to process the aerial photos into our reality mesh. This is what Ken did for us. And the reality meshes associated with the project are available for consumption in the project information model, so in your iTwin, in OpenCities Planner, and directly in desktop applications such as OpenRoads Designer. So just by associating a reality mesh to a project, then you have access to that in all of the different entry points that you can get into. As far as the parcels are concerned, what I did was I brought in the parcels from county data into the common data environment using 4 products and services. I used ProjectWise Design Integration, OpenCities Map, Design Review, and OpenCities Planner. First, the county parcels, I downloaded them and then placed them into the right-of-way and surveyed work area just as shape files. Next, I labeled the parcels in OpenCities Map. So I did a little bit of labeling there. The third thing I did was I created a right-of-way project iModel and then added the text from the OpenCities Map design file and the parcel information from the county shapefile. And then finally, after I did that, I published a map with OpenCities Planner. So this is the iModel that I created. And then the next thing I did was I added the iModel into my OpenCities Planner using the iModel and then for that right-of-way project. So hopefully that answers Chris's question from earlier on. So it's basically 4 steps. Just to review, I downloaded the geospatial information, the shapes. Used OpenCity's planner to label, or I mean, OpenCity's map to label the parcels. And then I brought it into an iTwin and then into OpenCity's planner. The DOT workspace files were downloaded and then imported into the ProjectWise data source just by drag and drop. And then those standards were then integrated into Bentley design apps, like Don said before, using a managed workspace. So what is this project information model? We've talked about an iTwin, digital twin, but ultimately it's just a project information model. That's kind of the non-technical term for it, or the non-software, or the kind of the uniform, the anonymous word for it, or whatever. It's really just a digital representation of one or more assets during the project delivery phase of the overall asset lifecycle. The project information model may be presented in different manners depending on the purpose of the model. And to create this project information model, typically individual model containers that represent project components are collected together and then rendered into an iModel that can be accessed by the appropriate project stakeholders. For our project, we have a project information model presented in 3 ways. One shows the parcel maps, which I showed you how I created that one. The next is for design review, and the last one is for construction review and scheduling. At the end of the project, asset information needed for the stakeholder will be presented as a final project information model. And I think you're going to see this project design model and construction model in other presentations, perhaps during the conference. At least that was the case last year. And as Don also said, for this project, we dove deep into ISO 19650, as it's the industry standard approach to deliver a project information model during project delivery. The ISO 19650 methodology consists of 2 key principles. The first is to break up project into information containers. And the second is to work each information container through a QA/QC process. Those information containers for ISO 19650, they're broken up into a predefined schema consisting of organization, system, location, role, and document type. The role definitions and document type definitions, they're already specified in the ISO 19650 documentation and can be altered for a specific nation. So the default is going to be the UK, their national annex. So that's the default schema, but other nations may be adopting their own. In the US here, that might be coming soon, but for now we kind of just default to the UK version just to keep things consistent and just to keep things to go along. So some typical roles are drainage and highway engineer, structural engineer. Those are definitely ones that we had in this project. We also have different document types, like a 2D or 3D model, the combined multidiscipline model, reports, calculations, others as well. Those are just some of the types. Now, when it comes to the other parts of the container, though, like the organization, systems, and locations, for a infrastructure project, for a horizontal type project, those typically need to be defined for the project itself. So in our case, for our project, we had the 4 different organizations that represented some of the different stakeholders of the project, including my company, that was the main design firm. Then we had Bridge the Gap Design Group to be a subcontractor to do structural work. We had ABC contractors, that would be the construction management part of it. And then we had the state DOT, which was the owner and operator. We also had 5 systems. We broke our systems down into roads, utilities, stormwater system, and bridges. And then within each system, we had different locations. So we had all of the 2 major roads and a couple cross streets for the roads. We had the 4 different ramps as roads, and then we had 2 bridges as well. So those were kind of parts of our systems that we had. Now the design team, in order to kind of model our ISO 19650 process, we had a design team that would complete the design and a review of each container in the work in progress state. And this state denotes the WIP CDE status. The main 2 roles for updating the project information models would be the design or discipline lead and the construction lead. Once the discipline approves the container, it was going to be put into the pending approval state, and this would be shared so that other members or other task teams would be able to see the information. And at this point, the BIM manager or discipline lead would attach the container model to the discipline's composite model. So maybe like a ramp got finished, and they would go ahead and attach it to the composite model. And then the composite model would then update the project information model on the next scheduled run. So we'd schedule, create a schedule of runs or updates on a regular basis. And if there's a new piece that's added to the composite model, it'll be added to the overall model as well. Now, to prove it, we had it situated where once the whole design team determines that the container is approved for construction, then the lead project manager or BIM manager would approve the container. And it would now be designated as approved for contract and would be denoted as the published CDE status. That's common data environment. And now the construction manager, they can attach it to their own composite model. So this is in their project. They have a composite model. And then on the next run for their model, the construction project information model would be updated. So we kind of had this workflow set up where either the discipline design lead or the construction lead would update the composite model for their particular task by attaching the approved or pending approval document, and then their model would be updated as well. So if we jump down into the discipline review, we're going to see how the approval process would go for a document. The first thing that someone would do is to create a document, the creator. And then when they create the document, they're going to add the appropriate title and revision note. So we're going to have some revisioning going on so that we can cater to having multiple revisions if necessary. The person that finishes the design selects their initials in the design by and drawn by dropdowns. And at this point, the designer should have a peer review the source file and make any changes or comments. Once the peer-to-peer review is complete, the checker would select their initials in the check by dropdown. And then finally, the discipline lead would approve the work in progress document and answer yes to the prompt. The document would then go into the pending approval state, and the submitted by would be populated. The pending approval state signifies that the design is ready to share for other disciplines to review in the project digital information model. And then finally, the BIM manager would attach the combined model, like I said before, for the discipline and system. So we talked about that earlier. All right. Now, as previously presented, we had the 3 task teams. We had right-of-way and survey, design, and construction. And within those 3 task teams, we had personas. And I think we highlighted these earlier, Don did. And we have, in there, we have the project manager, we have a designer, and we have the client. So those are the 3 personas that we're kind of trying to target. project manager would also include a reviewer. Okay. So as far as the project manager is concerned, we're going to use 4 different ProjectWise 365 services, but their front end would be Microsoft Teams. So first of all, in the Documents tab, they could access the documents in ProjectWise. In the Document Review and the Design Review tabs, they would be able to review documents in the data source and also review the iModels. And then in the Insights tab, we'd give them access to, and it's coming up there, to be able to view the overall status of the documents. So this would fulfill the requirement of needing to check the project status at any given time. And again, this portal is all through Microsoft Teams, so they can go through a portal or a endpoint that they're familiar with. Okay. And then as far as the designer, as we said before, their primary interface would be ProjectWise Explorer to open and edit the DGN files in OpenRoads Designer. And again, maybe someone can put in the chat window, when would you use ProjectWise Explorer? Is that when you're using CAD or no CAD? And why is that? So someone feel free to put it in the chat window and we'll see if you get the right answer. Don mentioned it earlier. All right. And then lastly, we have the construction user. And as we said before, they would use the Synchro construction project portal to do quantity takeoffs, cost estimates, and schedule modeling. The construction and design phases, this is just a note, we're going to streamline them into one project portal. That's one of the goals of the upcoming Bentley Infrastructure Cloud. So for this particular project, we just kept things separate because that's what we had and that's what we have right now. But ultimately, we should be able to use the Bentley Infrastructure Cloud to kind of get to all this information at the same place. So I'm still looking forward to that.